You're listening to The Voice of Russia. This is Curtain Up, our regular programme about Russian culture in London. This week, I've invited conductor and pianist Julian Gallant into the studio to talk about the cultural events awaiting us in the capital this autumn. Welcome to the studio, Julian. Now you've been out of the UK for a while and we haven't been in here together for some time. Tell me what you've been up to.
Well, I haven't stopped thinking about you for a start. So it's good to see you again and great to be back in Voice of Russia. I've actually been a little bit out of the picture. I've been in St. Petersburg. I've spent a couple of months in St. Petersburg, amazingly enough, refreshing my conducting technique, which needed that after 15 years of hard work. So I went back I went and studied for a while, which was great.
And why did you want to go there rather than do that in the UK?
Oh, well, it's very simple, because I love St. Petersburg and because I found a wonderful teacher. Alexander Alexeyev. He's a wonderful man. He's 75 years old, and he's one of Russia's lesser-known great professional conductors. And he was in Ulyanovsk for 8 years. A wonderful conductor, a master of conducting technique, but very natural technique. So no affectations, no silliness. It's all about conducting and actually conducting the musicians and really conducting the orchestra well. So I had a really great time.
And did you work with orchestras there?
Yes. I worked with orchestras there, and I've worked with orchestras since. And the wonderful thing is coming back to the orchestra and feeling a whole new life in your own kind of approach to the orchestra.
How exciting. So you're back in the UK now, and we're going to look forward a bit to this autumn and all the cultural gems that are on offer in terms of Russian culture in London and beyond. We start off with a ballet season. The Bolshoi ballet season in summer at Covent Garden was hugely successful, completely sold out. And we've had a bit of gap for ballet fans, but things are all starting again because the Bolshoi is going to have a ballet season in cinemas. Plus, this month, we've got Natalia Osipova from the Bolshoi coming to dance in Romeo and Juliet at Covent Garden with Carlos Acosta, which should be a fiery show, a fiery performance, and also Yevgenia Abrasova from the Bolshoi with Stephen McRae. Now, those performances are sold out, but there are day tickets for those. I know they're extremely popular, and Abrasova is very, very popular in the UK. People have been looking forward to that. She was here in summer, but she didn't perform very much. Osipova, of course, is a world star. It's quite interesting now, I think, Julian, how these ballet stars seem to want not to be affiliated just with one theatre anymore.
Yes, it's something that I think all ballet stars want to develop themselves individually, and we quite understand that. But of course, all ballet stars actually need to have a home theatre, and so they live this life where they're very much part of their own theatre, but they also have their independent solo careers, and that gives them the energies, and that gives them the freedom to exploit other things, perhaps dance in a more modern style, try different things, and then they come back to their theatres where they'll probably spend most of their time doing more of the traditional classical ballet. But it's really great also to see the Bolshoi vibrating so well. And of course, they're going to be actually in the cinema here on 5 occasions. Of course, the next 6 months, Picture House is actually showing that. And I think that's great, because I think ballet is an incredibly visual art. It works well on the screen, and it's very popular.
And it also fills the gap for ballet mad fans who are waiting for the next Bolshoi fix, who may not be able to get to Russia like us. I've also just come back from St. Petersburg, saw some tremendous opera at the Mariinsky Theatre, in the Old Theatre and the New Theatre. And people who are missing those lovely voices from the Mariinsky opera will be pleased to know that there's a big season coming up at the Barbican, isn't there?
Yes, the Mariinsky are doing a season at the Barbican very soon. And you should also draw attention to the fact that the Mariinsky, the Academy, I mean, the Mariinsky is not just is not a theatre, it's also a great centre of teaching as well, and a great centre of development. And the Mariinsky Academy is coming to the Wigmore Hall later this month, accompanied by Larissa Gergieva, and all their great singers are coming. And what I'm very pleased to see is that they're not all singing the bleeding chunks and famous songs of the repertoire. They're actually singing some of the composers who we don't know very well. And that's very interesting.
And this is the school where all the great opera singers at the theatre train, isn't it? They all go through this.
A lot of them do, but it nurtures young talents. They're not the only ones in Russia that do this. For example, in Moscow, there's also the Vishnevskaya Centre. Now, they were here last Sunday in Cadogan Hall. 7 wonderful singers came over and presented themselves. They did everything. They did a lot of Russian repertoire, and they did Verdi as well. And that is also a place which develops young talent. Singing is a very, very, very fragile art. If people start singing too much too young, the voices can be damaged. The adult voice of a singer really only comes about, especially in women, around the age of 30. It really only comes into its own. So it needs careful nurturing, and that's what they take very seriously, these academies.
And I think it's also terribly exciting for us to be able to see the big stars of tomorrow before they are the big stars, and see them as they come up. It's always great to see young people singing. So I'm really looking forward to that mixed programme. So later on, we've got Olga Borodina from the Mariinsky coming to sing at the Barbican. Tell us a bit about what the lovely Olga Borodina is going to sing for us.
Olga is, of course, one of the great sopranos of the age, and she really is number one. She's going to be appearing in the Berlioz season in the Barbican, and this is Valery Gergiev's series of 4 great performances of Berlioz's core works, starting with the Symphonie Fantastique, then going on to Harold in Italy with the great viola solo, then The Damnation of Faust, and then Romeo and Juliet. And so this is a very, very important season. It's not by any means the first time that Valery Gergiev has actually conducted Berlioz in the UK. I mean, he's done a lot of it. He's done it in the proms. It's repertoire that he knows very, very well. And the wonderful thing is that Berlioz, where you might have expected Berlioz to be rather a sort of foreign to Russian culture, Berlioz is a vital part of musical development in Russia in the 19th century. So music develops late in Russia in the 19th century, and Berlioz is a vital part of that. He met Glinka in Paris in the 1840s. He made 2 trips to Russia, one in 1847 and one in 1867, and he died in 1869, so just before his death. And both times he was feted everywhere. He performed his own compositions, and he conducted other people's compositions. You remember that Berlioz was not just a composer, he was also a great conductor and universally admired. So he's a vital part of musical development in Russia in the 19th century. And it's wonderful to see a great Russian conductor conducting a British orchestra in the music of Berlioz, because Berlioz is, of course, very, very important in this country as well. Berlioz came here a few times, actually not terribly successfully once, but the second time he came back was a great success. But he is much loved in this country, and all British orchestras have played lots and lots of Berlioz. And of course, Colin Davis, the great conductor who just died, is perhaps the greatest exponent of Berlioz who's ever been.
And it's interesting as well, isn't it, that Gergiev will play here with the LSO, but he'll bring over some star singers from Russia. Quite a heady combination, I think.
Well, that's what really, I mean, that is what London musical life is about, isn't it? This great international centre of music, stars coming over, mixing of styles, mixing of concepts. That's what we're all about.
Are there any particular concerts during this quite rich season at the Barbican that you're looking forward to in particular, Julia?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to those. I just wanted to mention also the Wigmore Hall should never be left off the radar, because some great things happening there. The Wigmore Hall, of course, has concerts every day. It has an enormous amount of music, chamber music and vocal music flowing through there. But a few things to talk about. Marc-André Hamelin, the great French-Canadian pianist, is coming to play Metna. That'll be an important event. The other important thing is the Jerusalem Quartet is doing a cycle of 3 Shostakovich concerts. And the first concert is with Elizabeth Leonskaya playing the Shostakovich Piano Quintet. Now, the Jerusalem Quartet is based in Israel, but of course it has very much of a Russian base to it. And their playing of Shostakovich quartets is simply not to be missed. I should also mention that the Great Belcher Quartet, which is an English quartet, or British quartet, I should say, is playing Shostakovich Third Quartet on another date. So if you want to really get to know the Shostakovich string quartets, you have every opportunity in October and November this year.
How often are these pieces played in the UK?
The Shostakovich string quartets? Well, some of them are played a lot. One of them was arranged for string orchestra and is played a great deal. There's a couple of small pieces of Shostakovich and Elegy and Polka which are played a great deal, but the cycle of quartets are not necessarily played very much. And they are the astringent, they are the demanding side of Shostakovich. So not so much the Fifth Symphony and the overtures and some of the grand stuff. I mean, the quartets are Shostakovich at his most intimate and at his most terrified, at his most insecure, if you like, but wonderful, wonderful music.
There seems to be ever more interest in this composer in recent years, with Petrenko in Liverpool, Gergiev, the proms, lots of people bringing us a lot of Shostakovich and a huge amount of enthusiasm for him in the UK as well as in Russia.
Yeah, his music does not date. His music was written at a certain time, a certain place, reflects everything that was going on around him, but it doesn't date. It sounds just as modern, it just sounds just as alive now as it did when it was written. And we find more and more Shostakovich, and we discover more and more in the composer. So I think he's a composer who I have no doubt that posterity will preserve Shostakovich.
So there's a lot more coming up as well. There's Russian Art Week, which centres around the auction houses, sales and various other related talks. There are events at Pushkin House, of course. But all of this is gearing up towards next year, isn't it, Julian, when we have the Russian-British Year of Culture?
This is an extraordinary thing when governments actually get behind culture on a cooperative basis. Russian culture happens all the time in the UK, but when the governments are in there, we have to really maximise and take advantage of that, because that brings an awful lot more people into the frame. This is it's not to say that culture is to be politicised or is to be somehow sort of affected by political considerations, but it just brings more people into the frame. So it's important, and everybody who's involved with culture needs to make a big effort to make that a success.
What do you think it brings that's different from the huge amount of Russian cultural events we have anyway?
Hopefully we'll encourage more people to support culture with money, because culture, of course, requires a lot of funding. So hopefully if the governments are involved with it, that will encourage businesses and other organisations to actually back it, which is what is the big fight that you have in culture all the time.
In Russia and in the UK?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, culture simply costs more than can ever be recouped from ticket sales. So hopefully when governments get involved and actually lend their support, that will encourage more backing and more sponsorship from business and contributions, personal contributions and so on. So that's one side of it, so baseline side of it. But the other side of it is that it spreads the net wider. It shows more people, it perhaps brings culture to more people than would otherwise have seen it. It shows that it's not something reserved for people who go to the Royal Opera House or who go to the concert halls in London. It will actually spread much wider and countrywide as well. So more people will know about it.
We've already got the Mariinsky Ballet coming next summer to Covent Garden as usual for their 3-week run. Any other events in the pipeline?
Big event, Maslenitsa, which has already been happening, of course. It'll be in its 7th year next year. That's on Trafalgar Square. It's backed by the Mayor of London. There'll be great artists coming over, folk artists, rock artists, because we must remember that culture is simply not divisible into high and low culture. It is a complete spectrum.
And that's in the spring.
That's in the spring.
That's soon, really.
That's at the beginning of Orthodox Lent. So it's the big party that takes place before Lent.
Well, I think it's great to have that mix, isn't it? Because ballet is not for everyone. It never will be. But Russia has a lot more besides those quite particular art forms to offer, and some very, very beautiful singing in all genres.
Well, what we hope is that we bring people who are interested in one culture to be interested in other kinds of culture. So perhaps if you're interested in folk culture, there's no reason why opera can't be your thing. And if you're interested in folk dance, and you've never seen ballet before, suddenly ballet is there, and you realise that actually they're part of the same spectrum. There's no big dividing line between them. Someone who loves ballet may well love opera as well, but they need to see it.
Do you think the dividing line is bigger in London, or let's take St. Petersburg in particular? Where do you think the dividing line is bigger?
I think it's probably bigger in the UK.
Yes.
I feel that Russia has such a cultural censor that the Russian is so open to all cultural events and styles and genres. But in Britain, we have tended to shelve culture. We have tended to say, that's for you, that's for you, that's for you, that's for you. But of course, those lines have to be got rid of.
So let's try and emulate St. Petersburg a little bit more.
Well, St. Petersburg is an incredible... There's so much happening there in these wonderful places, including the new Opera House, which has such an incredible technical facility and acoustic. So that's, whatever you say about the outside of the building, what's going on inside the building is really important.
The other thing I heard when I was there that I found interesting is that orchestras very, very far away from Moscow and St. Petersburg are being revived. I was talking to a violin maker who is bringing instruments to Yakutia, where despite the incredibly cold, bitter and difficult conditions, they have decided they need to have their orchestra revived. They've got their hall, they've got a conductor from Moscow or Petersburg, I don't remember, but they've got a big name. And they're working again, and they're doing decent work, and they're playing decent instruments made by masters, violin makers in Petersburg. And that's something else. That's incredible, because that requires a lot of will, political will and money.
It's something in the UK, in a British orchestra, the players will actually own their own instruments. The oboe will own his oboe and the violin will own his violin. Sometimes you get instruments that belong to orchestras. In Russia, probably 95% of the instruments actually belong to the orchestra. And one of the things that's been problematic, certainly in provincial orchestras, well, let's not call them provincial orchestras that are not in Moscow and St. Petersburg, is the quality of the instruments. So this is the battle that all those philharmonics all over Russia are fighting all the time, to bring good instruments into the orchestras, in the brass section, in the wind sections, and in the string sections. So that's great. Yakutia, of course, has actually got a great culture of music making. Nobody's been there. Nobody knows much about it, but there are several groups that actually tour around Russia and outside Russia quite a lot. And in fact, they've been on Trafalgar Square. There's been a group from Yakutia on Trafalgar Square before. So yes, I myself have been around Russia. As you know, I've conducted lots of wonderful philharmonics. The next one I hope to conduct is in Ijevsk, which
now tell our listeners where that is.
Ijevsk is not far from Moscow. Actually, it's not nearly as far as Yakutia, but it's the birthplace of Tchaikovsky, and it is also the home of the Kalashnikov factory as well. So it has a wide spectrum of life, industrial and cultural life.
All life is there, really.
But a great symphony orchestra, so I hope to be conducting that in the course of the next year.
Do you find that it's, as the years go by and you've spent a lot of time in Russia, as have I, that going to those places outside the capitals becomes more and more interesting? There are people there doing very, very interesting things without much applause.
Well, you and I both know that you find the real Russia and Russian people when you go outside the big cities, because then you have to speak Russian. You must learn it. You realize it's not actually as language that's as difficult as it's made out to be. You must learn it. And then you experience a different kind of life. It's perhaps more relaxed. You have more contact with people. And of course, there's this incredible landscape everywhere. So some of the richest experiences I've had in Russia have been outside the main capitals.
So when are you going to Ijevsk, Julian?
Well, I hope to be going early next year.
Well, can't wait to hear all about that, but we'll talk to you again well before that. Thank you for coming on the programme. Thank you.
Good to see you, Alice.
That was me, Alice Lagnado, and my co-host Julian Gallant, taking you through some of the Russian cultural highlights of this autumn in London. This is The Voice of Russia. Stay tuned. Off with the ballet season, the Bolshoi ballet season in summer at Covent Garden was hugely successful, completely sold out. And we've had a bit of gap for ballet fans, but things are all starting again because the Bolshoi is going to have a ballet season in cinemas. Plus, this month, we've got Natalia Osipova from the Bolshoi coming to dance in Romeo and Juliet at Covent Garden with Carlos Acosta, which should be a fiery show, a fiery performance, and also Yevgenia Abrasova from the Bolshoi with Stephen McRae. Now, those performances are sold out, but there are day tickets for those. I know they're extremely popular.
Out of the picture, I've been in St. Petersburg. I've spent a couple of months in St. Petersburg, amazingly enough refreshing my conducting technique, which needed that after 15 years of hard work. So I went and studied for a while, which was great.
And why did you want to go there rather than do that in the UK?
Oh, well, it's very simple, because I love St. Petersburg and because I found a wonderful teacher. Alexander Alexeyev. He's a wonderful man. He's 75 years old, and he's one of Russia's lesser-known great professional conductors. And he was in Ulyanovsk for 8 years. A wonderful conductor, a master of conducting technique, but very natural technique. So no affectations, no silliness. It's all about conducting and actually conducting the musicians and really conducting the orchestra well. So I had a really great time.
And did you work with orchestras there?
Yes. I worked with orchestras there, and I've worked with orchestras since. And the wonderful thing is coming back to the orchestra and feeling a whole new life, a whole new life in your own kind of approach to the orchestra.
How exciting. So you're back in the UK now, and we're going to look forward a bit to this autumn and all the cultural gems that are on offer in terms of Russian culture in London and beyond. We start on Obrasova is very, very popular in the UK. People have been looking forward to that. She was here in summer, but she didn't perform very much. Osipova, of course, is a world star. It's quite interesting now, I think, Julian, how these ballet stars seem to want not to be affiliated just with one theatre anymore.
Yes, it's something that I think all ballet stars want to develop themselves individually, and we quite understand that. But of course, all ballet stars actually need to have a home theatre, and so they live this life where they're very much part of their own theatre, but they also have their independent solo careers, and that gives them the energy.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia. This is Curtain Up, our regular programme about Russian culture in London. This week, I've invited conductor and pianist Julian Gallant into the studio to talk about the cultural events awaiting us in the capital this autumn. Welcome to the studio, Julian. Now, you've been out of the UK for a while and we haven't been in here together for some time. Tell me what you've been up to.
Well, I haven't stopped thinking about you for a start. So it's good to see you again, and great to be back in Voice of Russia. I've actually been a little bit out